to say no. I don't want to go. I feel like kids should just roll. This is what everybody else is doing. This is what I should do. This is what my parents want me to do. What if you really don't want?
All right, Rafi.
Does anybody else see this? One of my favorite moments is
Is it gonna go to the front? My arm is tired right now. Well, this is. I'm just waiting for him.
You're going to ask the ones that you have, right?
Yeah, everyone here is a piece, and everyone
you had like
Okay, we're going to start discussing some of these questions. And so now we're all going to talk out of the crowd here, and I'm going to sit down after I ask some of these questions. But the first one that I think was interesting is the mindset that money equals success being promoted by schools.
Say it again. Yes.
Is the mindset that money equals success being promoted by schools?
So we talked about this, and yeah, we did think that this idea of money and success being equated is being built in these very institutions. So it creates this this vicious cycle. What were some of the reasonings? I mean, it was a lot of there's no one promoting this idea that it's that school is for I say learning, which is like kind of axiomatic, but no one's promoting that. It's always we have the test prep, we have all these things that continue to be a means to an end within this school. So there's no one stopping and saying, why? And so I'm trying to remember because we had like a pretty intense conversation about that part too.
Well, so as far as the narrative being that we promote like money equals success, I don't think that's a narrative coming from school. I think it's a narrative coming from society in general.
Yeah.
Are we promoting that though? Or are we kind of combating that is the question. What are we doing to combat that? Because that is the wrong sort of ideology.
Arthur talked about that too. I'm not sure if we all agree on this, but we talked a little bit about how just living in a capitalist society will, whether we like it or not, enforce that ideology in our schools. And are these ideals possible to achieve in a capitalist economy?
Right.
Because I think if we're living in capitalism, it very easily tells you money equals success. That's the point of it. It's competition. So I don't know. It makes the future look kind of bleak. I think to think of it that way. I think there are things you can do to improve it, but you're not going to get the ideals. I think if you're living in capitalism.
Well, I think that's a brand of capitalism too. I think that's an interpretation on capitalism. I don't think that was. From what I'm hearing, it wasn't always that everyone was chasing the dollar. It's kind of a new thing. We talked about technology and the internet being a part of that, and now it's more now than it was before that people are really comparing themselves to these standards because they exist all around us. You go on the internet, you do literally anything that involves any kind of technology, any kind of media. And there are standards. And I think more than ever, we have this desire to meet those standards that are set up. So, yes, I'll agree that capitalism plays a role in it, and I did last time, but I don't know if that's necessarily, because if we just say, okay, capitalism is the reason that our schools are broken, then we can't get very far.
Shouldn't that be a reason for us to think of solutions outside of it, or to progress towards a system that isn't capitalism, rather than see it as something that is a roadblock for us?
So are you suggesting, because this, are you suggesting that we fix schools in capitalism or fix capitalism, American capitalism? Because they're two very different situations.
What's the capital in school? What do you work for?
I think it's the same thing at the end of the day.
Grades?
Grades, which
So grade is the capital.
Grades leading to what? Like, why do?
You tell me, as I forget, and I didn't get good grades. So. So is it a microcosm of a larger issue in society, like this school being under, it's reflective of the issues in society? And I don't know that everybody works for grades in general, just like in society. I don't know that everybody is money hungry or anything like that. So I don't know that capitalism would be any sort of, I don't know, thing to blame, really, but I don't know.
Walker, you said something that I think I need to disagree with. You implied that things are different now than they were, that capitalism has kind of changed us to where we are.
I think he was referring to, we were getting the old people perspective.
Well, yeah, but if you go back in time, people still worked for money. People still wanted the good things in life. People still wanted their children to do better than they did. And so I think that's a basic human. So it's always been there.
But I think that doing better, like what that means, has changed.
I think I personally mentioned citing like a change in attitude in terms of like, towards the 70s and 80s, America stopped being at the forefront of like the developed world, and Asian nations and other, nations not in the West started coming into play. So I think it's maybe a distinctly American desire to like be number one that maybe fueled this desire for like, you gotta make money.
Right.
One thing we said too was that, when we were growing up, some of us that are older, not everyone went to college. Like, they didn't have to. There were a lot of other choices, and so the job market has changed significantly also with what you're saying about the advancement of technology. And some of us don't remember, like, I don't know about other people, I'm probably one of the older people in the room, but I don't remember the pressure for grades. I don't even remember my parents saying, you have to go to college. I knew I was going to go, but nobody was like, you better go. And now we have high stakes tests, which is the currency, right, that we use. So we were just saying there's been, like, people in our group feel, correct me if I'm wrong, you feel a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure, which I never felt, and I still don't, whatever. So I mean, I think there's a shift there, right? I don't know if you're younger, Kevin, I don't know, but there is more pressure maybe.
One of the things we talked about was the God of discourse, and that, when I think about people in my life that, a phrase I often hear is kids today. And it implies that the kids today are different than we were when we were kids. And I've reflected on this considerably, and I think it's not so much that the children or the students today are different, it's just that we're seeing them from a different perspective. And that's not, people are still people, humans are still humans. Teenagers still do what teenagers do, and it's no different than when we were teens or when...
I think the stakes are different.
Well, that is different.
I'm going to say that what goes on, bear with me, and no offense, kids, but what kids are doing today, I might have lost a limb for doing when I was 15 years old, or a finger, so I feel like it's not really necessarily, and I'm teasing when I say that, but maybe not. The stakes are always different, so the stakes are what change. So I think for my mother and father to be happy, the amount of money that it required allowed my father more choice in what he did. So it's what came first, the chicken or the egg. But to raise kids in today's society, in today's very capitalist society, cost more money. So the stakes do change, and when somebody says the kids today, I think kids today are misbehaving with different tools than we did there, and with different venues. And I wasn't getting there necessarily, but I think the stakes have gotten more difficult as time goes on, and the only underlying thing I see behind it is the almighty dollar. Because everything comes down to how much does it cost? How much do I need to raise my kids so they can go to the college that I didn't get to go to? How much money does it cost for me to live in a suburb so my kids don't have to go to the public school down the road? So the end game seems to have changed, and it does seem to revolve around money.
But what should it revolve around?
I don't know how to fix it. Huh?
What should it revolve around? We're all here in this room taking a class called Deconstructing Education.
Right.
Someone actually asked,
Valuing other things other than higher education.
what if we live in an economically safe society? What does education look like then? If there are no stakes, if the only stakes are what you get out of it in the end, other than, a job or a degree or whatever it is.
You mean learning? What?
That was our question, actually, and that's exactly what it comes down to, isn't it? It comes down to learning, and it's sometimes I think learning is the forgotten element of education, and we talk about this in my class all the time, and I know other teachers talk about it in their class, and I think that we, sitting here as a group of people who value education and value learning, it's easy for us to look at that and say that because we value education, we value learning, but there's a lot of students who don't value that for whatever reason that may be. So how do we teach, if we were in an economically safe society, then what is the carrot, right, to learn? And that would be learning and the intrinsic motivation, intrinsic value. I feel like you're about to call me an idealist. I don't like it, Bob. But that
I'll be quiet then.
But I think that is. But if we were economically safe, everybody's okay economically, then what would be the motivation to go to school and to learn?
Ideally, shouldn't we all be operating in this building in that sense? That we are all, maybe not economically, we are the playing field is level. We're sitting in class here where everybody's opinion is equal, yes?
Yep.
Like your opinion is as good as his, regardless of stature. That might be the way to reach a student to say there is no hierarchy. The hierarchy is gone. We are all at the same level. Your opinion is the same as mine. Maybe we start there. Because there are things that he knows about, let's just say communism, that I might not. Rafi, I've seen your bibliography. So if you want to get back to that, of everybody's at the same level economically, it does fall upon, that's just not the reality though. So how do we make it here? How does that happen?
Let's go back to the God of discourse though. Right? That's exactly where that goes back to.
That's a good God.
He is. That's why he's like a fab. I like that God.
Yeah.
And Nick, I know you were talking
Goals of
about
education, even in a society where that doesn't exist, Mr. Hunt.
I'm sorry.
Should those, the goals that you just talked about, should those be the goals of our education system in a world where, we're not all economically equal, where there is competition and where there is, stratification? Should that be what our school, aims toward?
Well, what
should learning and, what you're saying, that would probably be the end to education in a world where, money is not a problem.
In the first place? Who historically was educated? It was, the very rich, that was later. I'm talking about much before. Who were the people that were touring Europe and reading classical literature, doing mathematics? It was always the rich, right?
Yes.
That was motivation. So then you want to ask yourself, what was their motivation? At the other, on the other end, the ancient Greeks did believe that the end, the reason for an educated populace is for a perfect society. So while you, Mr. Hunt, are discussing, actually a lot of people here are talking about intrinsic value of education. What is the external value?
But because in a perfect society, everyone feels valued.
Right.
So for our education system, we place a higher value on certain things than others. So if your sense of self-worth or your sense of value is in one of those areas that is not highly valued by the system, that inherently is putting you at a disadvantage.
And then what devalued? Where is the value coming from? What is the unit of value? Is it the dollar, which keeps coming up?
I hope not.
No, just to answer your question, I would go back to this real quickly. And I go back to Alfie Kohn and looking at what competition does. I just do not believe that competition is a good way to educate. I don't think that promoting competition is a good way to educate, because I think that in that case, we're always going to have kids who feel educated and students who don't feel educated. Students who are too busy worrying who got the 100 in the classroom as opposed to my grade. And the more that and I think because of our grading system, like we talked about last time, that competition is sort of in there. No matter what we do as educators or a school, to let students know that who you are as an individual and the growth and achievement that you make as an individual is what's important. This self-created competition that students have with each other, or maybe it is coming from teachers, I don't know, to me is a detriment to students being educated. It will push students to get better grades. It will push students to do extra credit, whatever that may be. Certain students, extra credit, whatever that is, that extra credit thing, whatever that is, because extra credit usually means more work, right? Not more learning. So when we push that competition, my philosophy is I don't believe that is a good way for people to learn and become educated.
But I think I think most of us in this room would agree that learning should be the end of education. I think that was kind of the problem that you guys were touching on. But I think it's interesting for us to ask, are we serving that in, this school in the U.S.? Is learning what we are working for with, our grades and tests and, everything that we do in school? I think we should, be asking ourselves that as well.
But like earlier you said, oh, you're gonna call me an idealist. I think like that's assuming that people are lazy. And it's assuming that people need a motivation to work. And I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Saga, you're talking about the beginning of school, right? Like the beginning of institutionalized schooling. But that's not necessarily the beginning of learning.
Oh no, I was, you talk about, there weren't as many schools as like it was a master and an apprentice, or a teacher and his apprentice.
Right.
Which was learning. I think that's what you're going on.
So formal, like, titles for teacher and student, right? But like that wasn't the beginning when people started like putting things together and listening, talking, communicating, like trying to attempt to, better themselves. So I think it's very easy for like the higher ups, especially like in our society, to maintain this system of, teacher and student and of you need a motivation in order to do something because people are naturally lazy. I think it's easy to do that because it keeps their power and wealth going.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of saying, like, you know what, people are curious, like, people want to do these things. So if we strip away all of these unnecessary, like, materials and the god of time, which we talked about, like, if you strip away all of that, I don't think it's idealist at all to think that people would still want to, pick up a pencil and still want to listen to each other and still want to, like, teach their child how to play a violin. I don't think that's idealist at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I think in this society, in the setup that we have, there's a bit of idealism there because we would have to break, which we talked about last time, break what we have now in order to have that. So I would agree with you.
Well, what's society? Because we talked a lot about socioeconomic and like socioeconomic stratification. We talked about how our school is so different. It is so different from any inner city school might be. And I guess you could go the other way. So, don't you think that, I guess, values and ideals and purposes here are different? And when you say this society, I think we have to be really careful. We don't realize what a niche society we see and talk about our society being in what context, like what society? This, like a middle class, upper middle class, suburban
this school, this idea of teacher, student, grades, learn, pass tests, get out of high school, that society. Maybe I'm talking more about the institution. Then I wasn't necessarily talking about like the demographic
No,
society.
I know, but I guess even the institution varies severely. You know, you went to a very different school. Like, you told us about this many times.
That was news to me.
Yeah. But, you know, Mr. G isn't here, but he talked about teaching in Jersey City. Very different, I'm sure. Yeah. Newark, my bad. Yeah.
But what is
You
the?
still want to say something?
Yeah, go ahead. He has to say something.
So we keep coming back to the money aspect of it, and I think that we underestimate the ability of students our age to balance what are we going to do that's going to make us happy and what are we going to do that makes us money to get dinner on the table and get housing. And I think the problem is, how do we get to that point? I think we all know that we're not just gonna, like, I don't think anyone here just says, I just want to make a lot of money. And I don't think we learn just to learn, we learn to do something. Like, I don't go to Mr. Han's class just to learn about English. I learn how to write, so I can write. And when you go to college, you do it to do something, but that step in between, and I was talking about it here, when you go from a college to a job, there's like the person will have a bunch of resumes, and what usually is the best factor to pull you out is experience. Maybe you internship, maybe you already had a job through your time in college, but when you're going from high school to college, it's not about that. It's just about, like we talked about, just doing things because it looks better, taking the next science class not because it's required, because they want to see it, when you could be doing things like, this school has CEIP, you can do internships and still get credit, but it's not pushed very much. We focus more on just showing you have the ability to learn and not the ability to do things.
And not only that, the common theme in all of this is people. Like, you talk about whatever society you want, Sagar, it's people. It's for the greater good.
What's for the greater good?
It depends. What do you want for the greater? It depends on what you
No,
want.
are you telling me that this school system right now,
No one learns. No one learns to do
good?
something as like by themselves. As far as being just selfish, I'm not going to learn something just to keep it in my little head.
Right. Okay.
I want to go back to what the distinction you made between intrinsic and extrinsic, which I think is a very important distinction to capture before the end of this. And a worthy goal of education would be to educate the population such that the democratic process leads to a rational outcome.
Here.
Here.
I feel like this is proof that the whole system's just failing.
Well, maybe.
I blame.
But I mean, that would be something that would unify people across different economic, backgrounds and motivations.
Dan, can you say that again?
Well, that might be a goal. That is the original goal of education in ancient Greece, which you had cited as a model, is to get the democratic process to lead to rational
Civic
outcome.
duty.
Civic duty.
Civic duty.
Yeah. So, rational thought and whatever other civic virtues would unite people across economic divides would be a valuable goal of education.
So why don't we prioritize those?
That might be a good question to start next time.
Yeah.
So for all the students and teachers that are here, teachers, there's a sign-in sheet over here that I would like your names on. Rafi sends out a survey after this. And students, I have a piece of paper somewhere that I would like everyone to write their name on too, right up behind Rafi there. Rafi, any parting words?
Thank you.
Thank you. The next class is, when do we?
Nice to meet you.
March something. That's right, I did not. Bad move on my part. You'll get an email.